OMG. At 3:50 a.m., I realized I needed help packing, but he ignored me, blamed me for the chaos, and mocked my requests. Seriously. We had very little left to pack, merely a few items that needed to fit into the 3 bags we possessed. I began tackling this task alone around 12:40 a.m. while he was out assisting my mother with something. Once he finished, I requested his assistance, hoping to finish promptly and go to bed. He did not respond, and instead occupied himself with entering information for the flights. He asked for my passport, which he last had, and I informed him I was unsure of its location. Despite my uncertainty, he continued to ask me to retrieve it for him, complaining that it was necessary. He then wasted time searching for a photo of it. Afterward, he got up and started gathering items, inquiring where to place them. I pointed out that there were still items left in the car that needed to be packed, and that we should not place anything inside until those were retrieved. He expressed frustration at the idea of going to the car, but I insisted that if he did not help, we would end up starting over. Eventually, he went outside and retrieved everything from the car. Upon his return, he began attending to other tasks that I felt were neither essential nor urgent and could be completed after we had finished packing and weighing the bags. He inquired about empty boxes, lamenting that there was excessive stuff for my family to potentially transport, as my mother may be moving in the coming year, and how such a situation might frustrate my aunt, despite the fact that I cannot address those issues. He then brought up a medical bill I had received, and for which I now owe more. He seemed inclined to address everything except what I needed his assistance with, including discussing stressful subjects and making unnecessary remarks. He started sorting through receipts and various items. I told him I required help and suggested that we could address that later since it was not a priority, to which he retorted that they were postage receipts and asked where the other ones were. I responded that they were in my backpack, to which he replied, "Not this one." I reiterated my need for assistance, and he seemingly dismissed my request by asking what I meant, insisting that his suitcase was mostly packed. He then left the room only to return moments later. I again requested his help, reminding him that I had been asking for a few hours at that point, and that we could complete the task swiftly if he cooperated. He dismissed my concerns, becoming defensive and asserting that he was helping, and that he was doing more than I was, that I was essentially contributing nothing. Throughout this, he kept asking if I was almost done, despite my previous statements that I was not and still needed his assistance. I questioned whether he would acknowledge what I was saying, as it seemed he was more focused on portraying my requests for help as a denial of recognizing his efforts. It felt as though he perceived my statements as claiming he had done nothing. Frustrated, I expressed my anger, prompting him to say he would overlook my frustration, suggesting that I hadn't had much sleep recently and was likely irritable. We became embroiled in a heated argument during which insults were exchanged, and he spat on me more than once. He claimed that the things he was doing were more critical and needed to be completed in the order he was addressing them. He accused me of trying to dictate and control by stating they weren't as important, insisting he interrupt his tasks to assist me when I had asked prior to him commencing anything. He further stated that all the belongings were mine, implying we wouldn't be in this predicament if it weren't for me, labeling me a hoarder with too much stuff. He continually referenced the items he retrieved from the car, arguing that if he had assisted me with packing before doing so, there might not have been enough space, or things would have needed rearranging. It seemed he inferred that I was upset he went to the car, or that I didn't appreciate his actions, even though I was the one who said that needed to be done first. He dismissed my needs for assistance and claimed his suitcase was complete, although it clearly was not, merely stating it appeared finished. He rose abruptly, snapping at me while trying to hurry me along, inquiring what needed to be packed. I found myself unwilling to continue, which angered him further, especially since I wasn't instantly jumping to help. He lamented about how late it was and blamed the belongings for the delay. I remarked that if he had aided me earlier, which would not have taken long, we would have finished sooner. I explained that there was not much left to fit in the bags, just a few items I was struggling to arrange or identify where to place. He wrongly assumed I meant there was more than there actually was and complained accordingly, even though I had repeatedly stated that only a handful of items remained. He continued with comments about how much stuff there was, most of which was already packed, criticizing me as a hoarder. He insisted he had done a lot for me, and that no one else would have assisted as much as he had. He voiced grievances about how all of my items would be returning with nowhere to go, combined with the boxes I had shipped. He had previously complained about this, often after first claiming he didn't mind me bringing my belongings or displaying them, only to express dissatisfaction afterward, just as he did in this instance by saying it did not bother him, that he wouldn't complain, and that he wanted me to bring my things. He minimized what I had accomplished, suggesting there was not much left to do, asserting that it paled in comparison to his efforts, which was a common theme for him. I unpacked everything I had already organized to demonstrate that there were several items. I then began repacking while he interjected comments along the way. He remarked that it looked simple enough, like it could be managed by one person, and questioned why I always needed his assistance, suggesting I should be more self-reliant. He inquired about the specific areas where I needed help. I explained that I needed guidance on packing items securely and suggestions on where certain things could go. He mocked my request and acted as if it were unnecessary. I became upset and questioned why he continued to discuss it relentlessly. In response, he claimed that I was the one being repetitive, accusing me of being the one who wouldn't stop talking. It was 3:50 a.m., and he was complaining about being tired, expressing his refusal to wake up early as we had planned, insisting he needed sleep while claiming I didn't require the arrangements we had made for the following day. He repeatedly brought up my mother, saying that I was the one being unreasonable and engaged in an argument, along with how much he had helped. He refused to acknowledge my statements regarding feeling ignored and his dismissal of my request for support. He continually referenced his contributions, acting as though I was only seeking his assistance at inconvenient times, despite having asked both before and after he completed various tasks. Throughout the ordeal, it genuinely felt as if he was irritated at being asked to assist at all. It seemed he aimed to complicate the situation unnecessarily, dragging it out longer than necessary to place the blame on me. He wanted to suggest that I was the reason we faced so much to accomplish with so little time left, even though there was not much to do, and we could have completed everything quickly together. It felt as though he was dragging his feet in helping, and that working collaboratively with me was too much of an expectation for him. All the unnecessary critical remarks from my aunt's annoyance to the medical bill, alongside his accusations of me being a hoarder and the critiques of my possessions, made it seem as if he intended to make me feel guilty and put me on the defensive. A similar situation occurred a few years ago when I sought his assistance with packing my backpack. He constantly snapped at me, stating he was busy with his own and instructed me to wait. I understood that we were short on time and only needed a little help, nothing that would have taken more than a few minutes. I repeatedly asked, and he continually responded with irritation. Once he finished, he grumbled about the time and the possibility of being late to the airport, blaming me for not being prepared, despite my having communicated numerous times that I required help, and he acted as though it was an inconvenience to provide it. For anyone who believes I expected him to do all the work, I have never claimed that. I simply wished for him to assist with advice or input on how items could be organized or packed securely while distributing weight evenly. I have previously attempted to take the initiative, only for him to express complaints and criticisms about the job I did. I am not willing to handle everything independently without seeking his input, knowing that would likely lead to similar complaints resurfacing. Story 2. OMG. After years of hardship and betrayal, I became the cheater in my toxic marriage. Can love really survive this chaos? I encountered my current husband during our high school years when we were 15 and 16 years old, respectively. Now, we are 29 and 30. At that time, we both resided in the same neighborhood, and I developed a crush on him while observing him casually as teenagers, although we attended different schools. Eventually, he transferred to my school, and we began dating shortly thereafter. I was attracted to him because he embodied the bad boy persona. He smoked marijuana and had a relaxed attitude, yet he was kind towards me. We got into some minor trouble together, and he faced legal issues, getting arrested several times for marijuana possession. After about a year of dating, he ended up serving a year in prison. I felt heartbroken but genuinely wanted to be with him upon his release, even after discovering that he had been unfaithful. While he was incarcerated, I casually dated someone else. However, that relationship dwindled, and I reconnected with him on the day of his release. We spent several more years together, being a bit toxic as teens and associating with a negative crowd. He eventually joined a group of individuals involved in bank robbery. They managed to successfully rob a few banks but were apprehended during their last attempt, resulting in him serving over 5 years in prison. Once again, I was devastated. I repeatedly warned him that he would be caught, struggling mentally to change someone who didn't wish to change. Unfortunately, he was indeed caught. Our relationship saw numerous conflicts, and he cheated during this tumultuous timeline before his second prison sentence. I lost my job and experienced significant depression for months following his incarceration. I wrote to him and managed to find money for phone calls and books in the initial stages. He proposed to me during one of our visits, and I felt truly happy. My love for him then remains unchanged today. Shortly after the engagement, I became involved in a very unhealthy 2-year relationship with an older, recently divorced man who had children and struggled with alcoholism. After enduring 2 years of turmoil, I chose to end that relationship and casually dated several other men. When I discovered my husband's release date, my heart raced, and I felt extremely anxious. I had always loved him, and that love persisted. 3 days after his release, we met up, and we got married approximately 1 month later. Following my toxic 2-year relationship, I attempted to refrain from sexual activity as much as possible, but he eventually gave me bacterial vaginosis, which I have yet to completely eliminate. It involves a pH imbalance, not a sexually transmitted disease, and every time I seem to resolve it, it returns. My only symptom has been an unpleasant odor, which has made me feel exceedingly self-conscious. I lack sexual confidence. During our marriage, we seldom engaged in sexual activity, creating tensions between us. He would express his needs and state that he never noticed any odor, but I remained unable to dismiss my insecurities. Having experienced sexual trauma in childhood significantly impacted this issue. After 2 years of marriage, he was unfaithful. Although he will deny it, I know he did. He saved her contact under a different name in his phone. I tracked his whereabouts through GPS to her residence. For at least 1 week, he visited her home daily after work to smoke marijuana. He insists that was the extent of it, claiming he had to deceive me out of fear because of my insecurities and tendency to monitor him, using GPS and reading his messages. I have always had a gut feeling that he would cheat again, stemming from past experiences when we were younger. We fought, and I initially gave him the cold shoulder, but ultimately, we stayed together. We both intensified our efforts to save money during the first 2 years of our marriage to purchase a house and move out of our inexpensive apartment, succeeding in acquiring the house of our dreams. For the following 4 years, we lived a relatively mundane life, maintaining a work-home routine without sexual intimacy. One evening, while dining out, I received a teary phone call from my best friend informing me of her husband's infidelity. She was heartbroken, and we rushed to support her. We took her out to bars, and she stayed with us on numerous occasions, as we wanted to be good friends during her time of need. Our social lives transformed, and we became accustomed to going out together frequently. One night, we decided to leave my husband at home. My friend wanted to salvage her marriage despite his betrayal and believed that sleeping with someone else would help her situation. Thus, we began searching for someone. My husband was aware of our intentions, though he did not approve, and understood we were trying to help her meet someone. Eventually, she met a guy, and we began spending time with him. At this stage, I gradually started to exclude my husband and only go out with my friend and her new partner. One night, he brought along a friend, and eventually I ended up hooking up with him. We never spent time alone, and soon, the 4 of us were hanging out together for several weeks. My husband sensed something was amiss, but he couldn't prove anything until he finally did. I was caught. Even during my affair, I continued to return home but was emotionally distant. I constantly denied my actions. My life unraveled once he discovered the truth. He moved every piece of furniture into storage while I stayed with family for some time. Our relationship became toxic, and communication broke down. The moment my husband found out, I ended the affair and pleaded for another opportunity. I felt devastated. Reflecting on my choices, it is hard to believe I acted that way. I don't consider myself a cheater and genuinely believe I will never repeat those mistakes. The guilt and shame are burdensome to live with. After some time, I begged him to take me back, and he gradually allowed me to return. We resumed life in the house, socializing at bars nightly and indulging in drinking. It felt as if we were merely playing house. He told me he couldn't envision a future with me and would never fully trust me again. One night, I awoke to find he was gone and his phone was off. This pattern repeated the following night. He had met another girl, prompting me to move out again so he could spend time with her in the home we had both worked diligently to acquire. We eventually reconciled after their relationship fizzled out. Presently, we find ourselves in a similar routine, living together as if nothing has changed. During arguments, he insults me, but we have largely avoided addressing our reality. We go to work, come home, and have sexual relations. Since he learned about my affair, we have transitioned from having no sexual activity to engaging in it daily. He has been vocal about his sexual experiences with her, while I came forward regarding my actions a few days after he confronted me with his evidence. Initially, I denied my affair. Now, I am at a crossroads where I still feel immense love for him and wish to make our marriage work. He has stayed despite our sexless past, and I feel guilt for both my cheating and his infidelity. It feels as though I channeled all the hurt from his previous betrayal into becoming the very person I despised. I still cannot comprehend why I behaved this way. I find myself crying myself to sleep each night, and I feel genuine shame when I look in the mirror. Will he ever be able to forgive me? Am I unreasonable for wanting to salvage our relationship? We do not have children together. I am 29, and I feel a sense of urgency regarding starting a family. He has expressed that he is not ready for that commitment following our experiences. Every day, I feel lost and confused. I'm aware of my wrongdoing and am not attempting to justify my actions clearly. I made significant mistakes. I truly believe my unresolved trauma contributed to my current predicament. I am also certain that had my friend's husband not cheated, or if I hadn't spent over a month hearing about how terrible infidelity is while grappling with past trauma, I would never have found myself in a position to cheat. I never sought out that type of situation. I am confident I would not have strayed had I not spent so much time intoxicated in that environment. I feel I deserve a genuine opportunity to make things right. Lately, I have noticed him texting other women. He does not conceal it well. It seems he is keeping his options open. I hypothesize that he sought an escape and is content that I provided him with one by my actions. What should I do? He is unwilling to attend marriage counseling. Should I remain in this situation? Should I attempt to move forward? Is there any possibility of saving our marriage? I need assistance. Story 3. After 9 days, my boss abused kids and staff. I got sick leave, spread the word, and she lost half her team, plus I took euros 6,000. Last year, I took a summer position at a children's camp. It appeared to be quite well compensated, and I wanted to experience working with children. The recruitment process was a bit unusual. I received an unexpected phone call for the interview. The woman who later became my supervisor spoke for about 2.5 hours and asked some very strange personal questions. For instance, she inquired, "You are not a COVID-19 denier, are you?" Keep this in mind as it becomes relevant later in the narrative. Regardless, I needed the income, and it was the only response I had received so far, so I accepted the job. She then required us to attend 2 meetings prior to starting the job, in order for her to explain the details to us. Each meeting consumed the entire day, but we were not compensated for that time as it was labeled optional. I was assigned to lead my team. When the first day arrived, we were confronted with over 20 children accompanied by their parents. However, the boxes containing the attendance lists, toys, and other supplies did not arrive. We essentially improvised, writing down names as children arrived, hoping they were indeed registered. Eventually, the boxes arrived, but the contents were sparse, to say the least. She had provided us with 2 types of games, Uno and one other game, and had purchased them 3 times each. We received some small instruments for the children to decorate, but when she checked on us a few days later, she berated us. She insisted that the kids should not have been allowed to take the instruments home, something she had never communicated to us, and her reasoning was nonsensical. The following days continued in this manner, as she would come around and yell at us for actions that seemed reasonable to all of us, while claiming that she had given us different instructions at the unpaid, optional orientation meetings, which I attended each time. She mostly talked about her personal life without providing any meaningful guidance. She went on to insult every conceivable individual. She expressed her reluctance to accept lactose intolerant or disabled children at the camp, arguing they were too much of a burden. My Muslim colleague was reprimanded for wanting to go home to her toddler after a 10-hour shift, and in front of everyone, she queried whether her son still breastfed, implying she had no valid reason to leave. Parents with questions or complaints should be taught like children because they behave like that when they did not have intimacy with their spouse the previous night. Additionally, she forced us to work over 12 hours without a break and reprimanded me when I chose to leave after achieving a 12-hour workday, which is illegal according to local law. However, 2 incidents in particular stood out when she directed her ire towards the children. First, keep in mind that this woman had an unhealthy fixation on COVID-19. She constantly altered the rules to fit her narrative, which consistently led to confusion with the parents. One day, she asked the children, aged 4 to 10, who had done an antigen test and who had undergone a PCR test. Naturally, not all the children knew what those tests were, and a little girl, no older than 5, raised her hand to answer incorrectly. When my boss realized this, she delivered a harsh reprimand to the poor girl, calling her dumb as a rock for not understanding the difference. I was in disbelief. I probably should have confronted her about this, but I refrained. The girl fought back tears and did not return in the following days. The second incident was even more unsettling. A 4-year-old boy bumped his head on the playground while the group was outside. I was in the office when my colleagues rushed in. I called the supervisor while another colleague dialed for an ambulance. When I informed her of the situation and that my colleague was already on the line with emergency services, she scolded me not for the boy's injury, but because we called for an ambulance. In her eyes, the situation wasn't serious enough, and she didn't want the father to find out, as if he would not have seen the visible injury. The ambulance arrived, confirmed that it was necessary to make the call, and assured us that the boy was fine. Thankfully, he recovered without further issues. I was incensed. I was overwhelmed with rage after only 9 days of employment, particularly because both the children and we had endured enough mistreatment. Rather than acting impulsively and calling her to express my anger, I cooled off and chose not to work the following day, opting instead to visit a doctor. I explained to the doctor that my supervisor was mistreating me, but since I could not terminate my contract prematurely, the doctor placed me on indefinite sick leave to prevent me from snapping. My boss was not pleased when I sent her the doctor's note, but I ignored her attempts to contact me. Subsequently, I spoke with my teammates and encouraged them to obtain sick leave, giving them specifics on how to proceed. They even attempted to terminate my Muslim coworker illegally. I informed her that their documentation was not legitimate and advised her to disregard it while also taking sick leave. Over the next 2 weeks, my location had to replace all 6 of its staff members, including myself, and I took all relevant records home to prevent her from sharing them. I also changed the password to my email account to further irritate her. However, the saga did not end there. Word spread rapidly, and due to her atrocious treatment of everyone at every location, 1 month after hiring began, she lost over half her staff, many of whom were still on paid sick leave. Allegedly, she contacted some of them and pleaded for their return, even offering bonuses as high as double their pay, yet she still could not convince anyone to come back. Fortunately, the parents had also grown weary, resulting in many children being withdrawn from the camp. By the end of July, while I was on sick leave, she reached out. She calmly suggested that if I did not intend to return the following month, I should let her know, and offered to terminate my contract without further obligations while still compensating me for the entire month of July. I responded that I was eager to return because I genuinely wanted to recover, spinning a tale of concern. Of course, I never went back and continued to collect an additional full month of sick leave, never engaging with her directly again. I also made an effort to provide information to any staff member across all locations who wished to leave while still receiving compensation or wanted to report her actions. In the end, this is what she faced for her disrespectful behavior. She lost half or more of her employees. She became universally disliked and was avoided by all, accompanied by extremely negative publicity. She had to pay me for 2 full months, my vacation time in monetary compensation, which was quite expensive for them, as I hadn't taken it due to my illness, my overtime pay, and the obligatory bonus for extra hours, all of which multiplied by at least 6. I received about €6,000 for just 9 days of work. Her entire business suffered a downturn. Additionally, I had to pursue my compensation through legal channels, which placed further burden on her. I cannot emphasize enough the careful planning I undertook legally to ensure that all employees received their due compensation without facing any risk of legal consequences. I felt secure in my position, as she would not be able to retaliate against me for my actions. I had studied law for a time and had everything verified by professionals. She attempted to harass me, but I blocked her. However, I heard that she shared my personal information with remaining colleagues and labeled me with derogatory names. Should she ever attempt to sue or blackmail me, I have documentation and witnesses to support my claims, including evidence of her attempts to dox me, insult me, and engage in other nefarious acts. After writing this out, I feel a sense of pride as well as surprise at how well everything turned out. I have not seen any job postings for that camp this year, so I hope it has declined in popularity and that she is currently unemployed. I apologize for any mistakes. It is 5 a.m. and I wrote this all down, inspired by other accounts I've read here. It seemed to fit well in this context. In summary, my supervisor was a deranged individual who attempted to engage in illegal actions against us and the children we were meant to protect, or to hinder us. I utilized government regulations to extract every penny from her while on sick leave, culminating in her losing over half her staff as they followed suit. Story 4. Rented a fake apartment, confronted the scammer, got double my deposit, and ended up celebrated by other victims at the police station. This event occurred quite some time ago, and I believe it is appropriate to share it here. It was November 2009, and I was listening to I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas while searching for an affordable apartment. I came across an appealing advertisement on Craigslist and arranged to see the place. I met the landlady, a stout woman with a Betty Page hairstyle. I wasn't there for socializing, though. I was focused on the inexpensive room. The apartment wasn't particularly attractive, but it was affordable, so I expressed my interest to her. She informed me that the apartment would be mine if I could provide a deposit by the end of the day. Excellent. I rushed to the bank and withdrew the $450 required, which was half a month's rent. She and I signed the usual lease agreement, and I inquired about when I could receive a key to move in. She replied that it would be a couple of days since the current tenants still needed to retrieve their belongings. For the time being, I was sleeping on a friend's couch, so I relaxed and explored the city, enjoying my first few weeks in a new environment. A few days passed without any word from the landlady, and I grew frustrated, leaving several annoyed voicemail messages, but unfortunately, I was ignored. Eventually, she left me a voicemail apologizing and saying that she could not rent the apartment to me. I began to feel anger rising. However, I was generally composed, so I researched my rights in this unfamiliar city and discovered that if someone withdraws from a lease without a valid reason, the other party is entitled to receive double the deposit they paid. Therefore, I calculated that she owed me approximately $900. I sent more messages and emails. Again, no response. She continued to ignore my calls, and my frustration mounted. At that time, I had just accepted a new job, but it wouldn't begin until the start of the following month. This must have been around the 3rd week of November 2009. Since I had some free time, I took the bus, bought a magazine, and sat at the bus stop in front of the rental property, simply waiting. I waited for 2 hours, but it turned out to be worth it. I observed her showing the apartment to another prospective tenant. I maintained my composure and waited for her to finish with her latest renter before approaching her to confront her about the situation. The moment she noticed me, she started complaining about how the previous tenant had changed their mind, and that was why she couldn't rent the apartment to me. I had heard enough. I positioned myself directly in front of this visibly distressed individual. Now listen to me. You need to pay me $900 as required by law by the end of today, or I will go directly to the police and let them handle this issue." She turned pale. For a moment, I thought she might be sick right there in front of me. She said, "Hold on, I will get you your money." I remember thinking, wow, that was easier than I expected. She went upstairs. The apartment was located in the basement of the house where she resided, and I kid you not, she handed me a bundle of cash and declared, "Here, this is ruining my Christmas, but here." She nearly pushed me off balance as she shoved the disorganized bundle of cash into my hands. "Thank you. Have a good day," I replied, counted the money, and walked away. I did not look back. I boarded the first bus that passed by, heading towards my friend's residence. It was not until I was home that I calmed down and realized that it was going to be a wonderful Christmas, all thanks to a deceitful, miserly individual. However, the tale did not end there. About a week later, I received a phone call from a friend inquiring whether the woman in the news was the same outrageous individual from whom I had obtained the double deposit. I was taken aback. Indeed, it turned out that this woman was running the same scam, victimizing numerous others at the same time. I was horrified, not merely because I had almost fallen for her scheme, but because it dawned on me that the money I received rightly belonged to someone else, leaving them homeless during the holiday season. I promptly went to the police station, where, believe it or not, there was a line of distraught individuals filing reports against this woman. I felt terrible, and when it was my turn, I approached the intake officer to share my account of the situation. I recounted everything, from being duped to leaving snarky voicemails, to staking out the rental property to confront her, demanding double my deposit back, and finally the successful execution of the law that led to my recovery of that amount. I informed the officer that I had taken money that belonged to other victims, and she looked at me and said, "You were the only one astute enough to confront her in a reasonable manner. You earned that money. Don't worry about it." A young woman who had become homeless and desperate couldn't help but overhear, and as I was leaving the police station, she approached me and asked, "Did you get your money back from that woman?" To which I responded modestly, "Actually, I received double my deposit from her when I threatened to involve the police." The girl blinked a few times, then grinned and started a slow clap, announcing to the other victims still waiting in the lobby of the police station, "This guy got her for double the damaged deposit." I felt embarrassed. However, unexpectedly, the line of victims started applauding, perhaps realizing that even though they had lost their money, someone had managed to make her pay, which brought them joy. They cheered. I felt uplifted, the officers laughed, and we all, there must have been at least 20 people, shared a delightful moment of holiday schadenfreude at her expense. I exited the police station with a clear conscience and a smile on my face, and I enjoyed every single penny of that deceitful woman's ill-gotten cash. For the skeptics, here are a couple of media reports about the woman who attempted to scam me, complete with bonus images of her being taken away. https www.pressreader.com Canada Times, Colonist, 20,100,318, 284,550,174,206,387. https https://BCCTV News Ka BC landlord facing multiple fraud charges 1.469910. https://BCCTV News Ka BC landlord facing multiple fraud charges 1.469910. Happy holidays. Edit corrected some spelling errors and fixed a date. Additional edit thank you for the silver. This situation just keeps paying off. Further edit gold. You all drool. Fourth edit now with platinum. Stop it, everyone. Final edit yes, this truly happened. I am not a creative writing student, but I appreciate the compliment. Thank you for all the awards. I simply wanted to share a fun story about a rather amusing experience I reflect on annually at this time. No, I don't harbor any hatred toward the woman. I just believe she made some poor choices. If she happens to read this, I apologize for calling her a derogatory name. Sort of,